Hey folks, welcome to the Unsung podcast. I am your host Mark Fraser. I'm joined once again by Chris Cusack as ever. This week Dave is currently auditioning to be the next James Bond.
Good luck, David.
Fuck me, man. That would certainly be a comedic turn for the franchise.
It would. And for Dave himself. So this week once again we are joined by Fran and Babs. I mean, they've just sat in the one position for an entire fucking week and just thought about nothing but Muse.
I mean, yeah, I've been in a waiting room listening to Muse the whole week. There are worse ways to spend a week, but still, I would have appreciated a bit more variety. Thanks, guys.
Fran's been watching InfoWars.
Going by my results earlier, I can definitely deny that.
Yeah, if you didn't catch last week's episode, that may have been a bit of a incongruous reference. This is part 2 of a 2-episode special on Muse. The first episode involved me going to the mat with our 2 special guests over Muse's uncomfortable parallels with the rhetoric of the alt-right, including them being quoted for various campaign ads and stuff by people like Glenn Beck. Not that they are politically aligned with that, but we had a little chat about some of their more unusual commentary. If you didn't hear the first part, I would encourage you to go back and listen to that, because we are going to make reference to it. This week we're going to focus on a little bit of their back catalogue, then the album that our guests have chosen, and that album is
Origin of Symmetry by Muse.
Before
I feel the enthusiasm in the room.
I always sound sarcastic. I'm not being sarcastic. You'll find out our true feelings about this record soon.
Mark doesn't have a non-sarcastic voice, so it's one of those things like if he ever has a child, they're going to be like, it's a boy. He's going to be like, great.
But before we get into that, Fran and Babs, you want to plug your own podcast again?
Yeah, I mean, I did it last time. Fran, do you want to do it this time?
So it's called Over Underrated, and basically we find someone or ourselves to chat about an artist that never is ever heard on a podcast, and then to make sure people listen to it, we then put them up against an overrated artist and decide between ourselves or the guests whether they are over or underrated. It's a lot of fun. Give us a listen, please.
I love how Fran's revealed the real...
We span the genres of ABBA, Primal Scream, Pole Jam, Manson, and girl bands and boy bands. And in the future, who knows, we may have Muse.
I noticed on your Glasgow episode, you had Primal Scream as overrated and Teenage Fan Club is underrated.
Yeah, and the result was the guy who chose Primal Scream as overrated at the end decided that they're not overrated. So this is what you can do. You can bring the discussion to the table and not agree with the fact that they're called overrated at the start. You can just put it out there. Could they be overrated? It turns out they're not. And
he listened to every single Primal Scream album, and he still came to the conclusion that they were, and I think I would have said Primal Scream are overrated, but was won over in the end as well. So I think, sometimes what's interesting about doing these podcasts, right, guys, when you have to sit down and analyse something and really kind of think about it and do your research, sometimes it can sway you in the other direction. And I think with a lot of music as well, and maybe we'll get onto that, it really depends what you were expecting at the time. If you're a fan of a band and then you're expecting something and it doesn't deliver, I think that's very different from discovering a band at that period. I think Fran and I, because there's a bit of an age difference, sometimes I've come across stuff as a teenager, and Fran was like, well, I was listening to this when I was in the clubs, and I'm like, oh, if only I could have listened to this in the clubs. So yeah, we do change our minds and each other's minds sometimes.
Yeah, and sometimes no matter how much convincing evidence is thrown at you, you just get more entrenched in your position.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, as promised, this week we are going to discuss the discography of the English rock band Muse. Oh boy. Yep. Well, we have to start at the top, which I guess would technically be a self-titled EP and then a Muscle Museum EP, but it is probably, for the purposes of this podcast, Showbiz from 1999.
She had something to confess to, but you don't have the time, so look the other way. You will wait until...
Babs?
I bloody love Showbiz. I think I'm alone in this. I can understand the Radiohead comparisons that came with it, but it really is one of those albums where I like almost every song. The only one I usually skip is Hate This and I'll Love You. And I think, as discussed last week, they make a lot of noise with only 3 instruments. And I think what Muse are really good at, especially in the first half of their career, is quiet, loud, quiet. I don't think it's as good as Origin of Symmetry, but I think it's a very good debut album. And I really like how they interpret the songs from this album live, because they often change the beginning, change the ending, mix it up. And yeah, I said to you that I'd got this quote from NME, basically defending Showbiz, which I'll read out to you, saying, "The arch overreaching pop of Newborn and Time Is Running Out, their DNA swamps Sunburn. The curling riffs of Plug and Baby, given an Arabian twist on Muscle Museum. The histrionic scream-major riots of Stockholm Syndrome and Microcuts, born in the roaring crawl of Cave and the Mediterranean mania of Uno." I could go on. So I think it is very different from Origin of Symmetry and the Future Works, but I would agree that it is Muse DNA, and Showbiz and many of the related B-sides are much better than anything that they've produced since 2009.
I guess Sunburn is probably the most likened to most of Origin of Symmetry, with like the piano intro and then getting stronger.
Come waste your millions here. Secretly she sneers.
I found it a struggle because I found Unintended insipid, and I remember people playing on an acoustic guitar.
I was one of those people playing it on guitar. Yes,
I thought,
yes.
Jesus, stop singing this whiny Jeff Buckley wannabe track. Incidentally, we mentioned last week that Bellamy has made quite a lot of money. He also has bought Jeff Buckley's guitar that he wrote Grace on. That's what you can do when you earn the bucks. I think on the first album, I kind of like Sunburn, maybe Showbiz, and maybe Cave, and little else, unfortunately.
Buying Jeff Buckley's guitar at auction, that's one in the eye for the capitalist pigs. Yeah, I mean, the Sunburn thing's interesting because it really, really, really does sound like a kind of more anemic version of Newborn. Or, more to the point, Newborn is a more muscular version of Sunburn, perhaps that's a fairer way to put it. I do kind of feel like I can see the Tom York comparisons much more justifiably on this one, that Sunburn in particular sounds like Tom York doing vocals over some kind of like amalgam between My Vitriol and Keen. It's okay. I mean, this came 2 years after OK Computer, so the gauntlet had like firmly been thrown down. I think in a lot of people's minds this came after the Bends, but it didn't. It came after OK Computer, and a good bit after OK Computer. And OK Computer was very much a sort of sea change album for British indie as well. And so I don't think it sounds particularly forward thinking given that context. It's fine, and I think at the time it was fine. It was cool. I liked the kind of melodramatic piano. It was an album that, if I'm being totally objective about, I did dip in and out of, but I was never fully convinced. It was never an album that I listened to the whole way through. Although I did like the fact that they did get a wee bit chunky now and then. It made sense. They were touring with bands like Feeder, who people probably don't remember it, but on like Feeder's first album, was it called Polythene or something like that? I mean, they were a lot more sort of like quiet loud, a bit sort of emo-y and mystical and stuff. And this is consistent with that. Muscle Museum is a really clever song. With weird chords, and it really captured people's imaginations, and I think that song, more than any, probably created a sense of anticipation for what they were going to do next. Uninvited, I think, is fucking awful. Hate it. Interesting detail, by the way. Muse, I'd mentioned in the past episode that Muse had already played the USA a number of times by the time they were starting to make waves. In 2001, on September the 10th, Muse played in New York City, and they chose to fly to Berlin overnight rather than stay in their hotel on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, which would have been September 11th.
Maybe explains why they were so paranoid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it does.
I think I remember like 2000 or 1999, Muse were on tour with a band called Coldplay playing pubs.
Who?
You can imagine that, a little band called Coldplay. You can imagine Muse and Coldplay were playing together, and that's how close I think Muse were to that sort of like indie vibe before they completely moved away from that. You know, they were linked to like Coldplay and like maybe
Absolutely.
Travis or a bit that sort of like whiny indie.
Oxford rock. No, I mean, honestly, that kind of like polite English rock that was like a little bit lively, but not too lively that you couldn't play it in a BMW. You know, it was that they were there, but as we said, as I conceded as well, with Origin of Symmetry, they really pushed away from that. They pushed into a much more interesting direction, but I think this was just a little bit too on point with the likes of Coldplay and those other kind of like...
As Adam McGee said, it's bedwetters music.
Well, if Alan McGee said it, he's never made any mistakes.
But just to say as well, John Leckie produced this. So it's not totally unreasonable that there is Radiohead comparisons given that he produced the Bends. And I'm surprised that you say it's Muscle Museum that it kind of is the foreshadower, because to me it's Showbiz. Showbiz starts so quietly and gets so menacing and loud, and his voice goes so mental. I think that's the biggest predecessor here, and definitely my favourite on the album. And I really like how normally when they play it live, they make it much, much longer and epic.
This was still mixtape period for me. I mean, I know it's like, you know, just on the cusp of the millennium, but this was still sort of picking and choosing tracks and slamming them onto tapes or CDs and going in cars, you know, as a youngin'. And Muscle Museum was definitely the tune that was chosen for that. I mean, I get your point. You're right, actually. The dynamics of that song do make it pretty consistent. But no, Muscle Museum was a standout. And it was the one that if I was trying to get other people into it, which I did, you know, that was the one that tended to make a wee bit of headway.
And I presume we all know why Muscle Museum is called Muscle Museum, because it's the
No idea.
because it's the word before and after Muse in the dictionary. So there we go.
Wow.
Yeah,
Cool.
That's how deep it gets.
Yeah. I mean, I think the comparisons that get to Radiohead at this time are quite deserved, to be honest. It does sound more like the Bends to me than it does OK Computer. But I'm not a huge Radiohead fan, so don't quote me on that. I used to like half of this album when I was a wee guy, and listening back to it, I actually think it's pretty dull now. The singles are fine. Muscle Museum is a really good song. The structure is what you'd expect from a Muse song. It's quite fun. Cave, for me, it really hints at that sort of grandiosity that they'd kind of later fully embrace on Origin of Symmetry and then onwards. Got quite a catchy chorus and some really nice guitar parts, and it's got that big piano ending as well. I used to love Showbiz, but I couldn't get on with it now. Listening back to it now, I was like, it just didn't hit the mark for me anymore. But I rinsed that song when I was a wee guy. I really did.
I cannot imagine you, given all your tats and your beard and your check shirts now, sitting there listening to Muse. That is just
controlling your feelings for too long.
Well, it's quite funny.
Exactly.
So the first time I ever played music with people, we actually did a cover of Newborn, and I used to be able to sing it perfectly. And now I'm a lot older, I can't really do that. But back then, I used to be able to, and used to practice in my pal Danny, his front room of his dad's house, because his dad was a mad musician. Yeah.
You'll excuse my sceptical eye. I'm just that you could sing that perfectly.
I could, yeah, it's weird. My voice is deep now.
Obviously that was followed by Origin of Symmetry that we'll go into in detail. I've noticed that the room seems to have a bit of an affinity for a record called Hullabaloo that came out in 2002. Would you care to explain why? Because I thought this was just a collection of B-sides and a live CD.
Fran?
Well, it's called a soundtrack, isn't it? It's the soundtrack of the film, is how it's perceived by Muse. It's not called a live album. And yeah, it was. I remember buying it and being confused with what it was, because I think I put on the B-side first and was expecting a live album. But it also had 2 new singles, Dead Star and In Your World, which I think are killer tracks. And then, yeah, I mean, I then found out by that live DVD that Muse are fucking massive in France. Who knew? Because, like, I think in those days they're kind of playing to, like 500 people in the UK, and they seem to be playing to maybe like 10,000 people in Paris or something. It was insane.
I think similar to Placebo, who are also massive in France, I think the French aren't as snobby about histrionic rock music as the British.
Hey, you're in Belgium. Come on.
I'm in Belgium has a lot of good music, as you can listen to on our Belgium episode.
Oh, hey, we are going to get there. Don't worry. I am not disagreeing on that front.
Yeah. So I think, as I mentioned, sort of Hullabaloo, I would have been out. Like, that was probably what they were promoting when I saw them live. I really love this album because I genuinely believe that Muse B-sides from Showbiz even up to maybe not Black Holes and Revelations, but up to Absolution are fucking incredible. I think it really showcases them as a band. And actually, on Hullabaloo, it's not even my favourites. It's not what I would pick as my favourites, with some exceptions. Like I think I've got really obsessed with Yes Please this year. Don't know why. But I think this album shows, like, these are our B-sides, but they're still excellent. And, this shows what we're like. And as Fran said, Dead Star and In Your World are very good tracks. But it really showcases them as a live band. Like, there's an arrogance, definitely, to releasing an album like this as your kind of third album. But on Citizen Erased, on Showbiz, they're much longer and much more fleshed out. They're a confident band. I really like personally how Matt Bellamy at the end of Dead Star goes "Bonsoir Paris," which it sounds quite funny, but actually I'm like, how many English bands fucking bother to speak the language of the countries that they're in? So
well, I think we can say bonsoir in Britain. But if we go to Poland, it might be a bit harder for us.
I
think we've spoken about this before, but it seems to be in this era of bands that they really paid a lot of attention to B-sides in general. Like, they seem to just write a lot of songs and they're actually quite good. Oasis are quite well known for it as well, with the Master Plan and
yeah. But the thing is, man, CDs were still raking in cash, so you still went and bought CD singles, and you'd have multiple versions of a song, like a single that came out. I remember, I think it was one of the Faith No More singles came out in like 3 different versions of it, so there was 3 different sets of B-sides, and I remember buying all of them. So that there was a real source of revenue there. I mean, you made, as much as CDs and CD singles didn't make a lot of money, they still made a fuck lot more money than an MP3. So it's really interesting to think that it was kind of a craft, and a B-side was a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the thing about releasing standalone tracks online. Like, what's happened to that kind of Twilight Zone, that no man's land of the B-side, where you could try out things, you could do covers, you could fuck around and experiment, you could invite people to do remixes and stuff. There was a really interesting amount of scope for experimentation in the world of the B-side. This is actually maybe something we should discuss in an episode in and of itself, but that is a what's the phrase? A fecund period for Muse, because they were able to do a lot of like really ostentatious things on their B-sides and see if they worked or not, and that maybe set the scene for some of the stuff that came after it.
Absolutely, and it's the bare bones, because with something like Bedroom Acoustics, which is Matt Bellamy fucking around playing flamenco on an acoustic guitar, or Piano Thing, which is Matt Bellamy fucking around on the piano, aping Rachmaninoff, like, that is the DNA of Muse, with everything else in between, like the quiet cover version of Hypochondriac Music, or Agitated Recess, Yes Please, Twin, which are much louder and angrier. I think it shows quite well what they're capable of.
So then came a very under-acknowledged album called Absolution in 2003. Their first UK number one album and the first album to chart in the USA. Tying this back in with a little bit of what I was saying last week, this is the album where the first real signs of those apocalyptic themes started to emerge, albeit it's still a much more direct record. A couple of interesting bits of trivia about it that I noticed. The cover is by an artist called Storm Thorgerson, who I think they worked on a couple of things with. It was inspired by a painting by René Magritte called Golconda, except this was sort of interpreted to factor in the background of the Iraq war, because obviously this is 2003, post 9/11, America invades Iraq. This is very zeitgeisty, and I think they got a lot of awards for it by taking that slightly political slant on this album. People were like, oh, this is a band with a little bit more to them thematically. But I do think the political tone in it is acceptably understated. I think Stockholm Syndrome and Butterflies and Hurricanes have political edges to them, but it's not beating you around the head. It is interesting that one of the last songs written for the album, Time Is Running Out, is clearly far and away their most overtly political, both in just in the title and the lyrics, but in the video, which was kind of a homage to Dr. Strangelove. And you see the band making a beeline for that territory as a sort of quasi-political commentary band. That song was also their highest chart placing to date. It was a breakthrough single on US radio, so I think that kind of whole reward reinforcement phenomenon played a part there as well. As I was saying earlier on about the algorithm gravitates towards where the money is, or where the clicks are, or where the attention is, and I think Time Is Running Out really represents that.
I think this is the band full of confidence on this album. You can't do a track like Butterflies and Hurricanes without knowing you're going to be a big selling artist, because you can't play to 100 people in a pub Butterflies and Hurricanes. It's not going to work, you know. Yeah, this is music for the masses. They knew they were going to be headlining festivals. They knew they had to make a bigger sound, and I think this is as large as the sound got without me starting to hate them. I think this is, for me, their best era, and then after this, it's just too much, you know. This is exactly like I said, perfect. And Time Is Running Out was a great single, although listening today, I cannot unhear Matt Bellamy breathing before each lyric. Yeah. He goes, time is running, and it ruins it for me.
But he does that a lot,
every
like not
song.
just in this. I quite like it, actually.
Do you? Yeah. Once I hear it, I can't unhear it, unfortunately. I love the video to Time Is Running Out. I love Stockholm Syndrome. It's got an epic riff. I mean, the tracks, you know, if it was a smaller band, they would be under 4 minutes. Obviously, when you're Muse, you can allow to go on for 6 minutes. I mean, not many of the tracks in this album are actually radio edit friendly, are they really?
There was an edit of Butterflies and Hurricanes.
Was it really?
Without the instrumental bit that makes it interesting, yeah.
But was that a proper single, or was that just a video single?
It was a single, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
But any band who can have an intro and an interlude, you know you've become a big deal. You've gone into Queen territory.
Honestly, Stockholm Syndrome, I think, is just, even still, just a legitimate total
That's a screamer. That's a total screamer of a song.
That is an absolutely fucking brilliant song. That dropping out of nowhere sort of super saturated chorus that they do is such fucking original songwriting, like really, really clever and really well judged without, you know, tripping the song up itself. I think it's brilliant. And another one on that I think is aged really well is Hysteria.
Give me your heart and your soul, and I'll break it out.
That Justin Theroux in the video, I think, an extremely ripped young Justin Theroux freaking out in a hotel room. That pitch shifted vocoder thing they do in the chorus, and that is brilliant. Those are two of the strongest songs the band ever wrote for me, and as much as I am actually really not a very big fan of the album overall, I think they are real fucking standout moments. And this was the point where Muse had already sort of jumped the shark for me, but they became a guilty pleasure band, and, you know, the likes of Stockholm Syndrome and Hysteria, I could sort of like crimp them out of their catalogue and say, look, I don't know about this band, but fuck me, man, they can write a really good song on occasion, and those are two prime examples.
Have you noticed that this album and one before has quite influenced Royal Blood, especially the bass sound?
The tone, yeah, you know, that's really interesting. It's like a kind of British pop interpretation of some quite extreme American metal. You know, it comes from the world of American metal, and actually, Babs, I don't want to shoot my bolt too early here, so we'll mention it on the next record, but some of the names they drop as influences for their tones.
Oh yeah, really, I know who those names are. Yeah.
They're really, really interesting, right? Yeah. And this, as you say, it became like the Royal Blood. The other one is Death from Above, 1979.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. That super saturated, compressed, but controlled in a way where you could DJ it in a sort of quite a dancey indie set. It's an interesting co-opting of something that's quite edgy, but making it quite palatable.
I remember the build up to this album. It was really exciting, and I remember buying the album and watching the extras on the CD-ROM and watching Dom on the drums, basically I think for Apocalypse Please, trying to get different sounds. So he was like with his drum kit in a swimming pool hitting the drums for the echo. And I have to say, I think for Dom, this is the album where the drums level up completely. Having analysed Muse's discography with a bit more of a, let's say,
ad nauseum.
Global eye is what I was going to say. And I really enjoyed rediscovering this album, because I think with Muse, as much of a fan as I am of the first 4 albums, plus Hullabaloo and stuff, it's very rare for me to actually sit down and listen to one of their albums, because I know them so well. I know the songs that I like. So actually sitting down and listening to it as an album, I would have said, Hysteria, Stockholm Syndrome, Butterflies and Hurricanes were my favourites, but Thoughts of a Dying Atheist, Ruled by Secrecy, what a fucking closer.
What a fucking tale.
Oh, yeah, of course. And Thoughts of a Dying Atheist, I think that's a much more interesting political song, and it's, than writing about fucking aliens. I think when I heard this album, I was like, okay, this has gone into a different direction, but for me, it doesn't quite live up to the hype, but I'm still interested. And it was very interesting to go back and be like, no, I still love most of this album. I think for me, the skippable songs are the slower ones, like Falling Away With You and Blackout, Sing for Absolution. But I'm someone who normally skips the slower songs anyway. And actually, I did still enjoy listening to them.
This is kind of where I fall out with them a wee bit. I think the album's over long. I'm a punk kid, right? So I like my songs to be like 3 minutes long. My album's about 25 minutes in length. But Muse have never done that, so you get what you're given, I suppose. I think Time Has Run Out is a really, really good bit of pop rock songwriting. That chorus it's a monster.
I fucking hate it. I hate it. It's absolutely done to death.
Yeah, it's overplayed as fuck, man, for sure. But I don't like the ending of it either. But I think the way they lead into that chorus is really clever. Stockholm Syndrome, I learned how to play that on guitar when I first heard it. I mean, that's a lot of fun to play. They must be absolutely having a ball when they play that song live, because it's...
Yeah, I mean, that's top 3 songs ever written by them for me, man. I think it's a really, really inspired piece of music.
I like Hysteria because it's got a sort of sci-fi feel. The song that nobody's mentioned, which I actually really like, is A Small Print. It reminds me of Showbiz era Muse, but when they were good on Showbiz, I think it's a really triumphant sounding chorus as well, and I think it's pretty catchy. See, I like it when they do direct rock stuff like this, and the palm mutant bits now are pure chonky.
So I think an interesting detail after this is that I think it was 2004 they played Glastonbury, and Dominic Howard's dad died just shortly after their set.
Wow.
It's fucking
What
horrible.
set?
And in 2006, Black Holes and Revelations. Now, Babs, we're going to have a moment here. We're really going to click here, right? For this album, there's in the various press, there were a few bands that popped up as influences.
Mm-hmm.
I think a really, really relevant reference point when we're talking about tones is Lightning Bolt.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Hyper Magic Mountain, I think, would have been around about this time.
Yeah.
And that weird, incredibly saturated, kind of honky, overdriven but almost danceable guitar thing was it was a really interesting development in the world of kind of like vaguely extreme guitar rock. They mention people like Sly and the Family Stone, but let's get fucking serious and talk about Millionaire.
Fuck yes.
Right, because this is so weird for me, right? Because I am usually having to try and explain what the fuck I'm talking about when I say that Outside the Simian Flock is literally one of the best albums that's ever been made.
I could not agree more. Absolutely.
Yeah. Babs, you're in Brussels. This is a Belgian alternative rock act. Now, I know this because I listened to your podcast. You saw them in 2018?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, sorry to be this guy, but I saw them opening for Queens of Stone Age.
I fucking hate you. Right, so our guest, Kate, on the punk episode, she also saw them supporting Queens of the Stone Age because Josh Homme produced their second album.
Yes, he did.
And Tim Van Hamel from Millionaire was in the first iteration of Eagles of Death Metal as well.
Yeah, we'll not hold that against them. But they are fucking amazing. They were totally innovative. I think on the show you mentioned them as being a combination of, what was it, Prince and...
Oh, God, in the Sex Pistols, I think.
Sex Pistols, yeah. Which, the second part of it I don't get. The Prince thing I totally get. Tracks like Come With Me.
Oh, really?
It's just like a weird, saturated indie Prince. Mark, we're going to be back on this for an episode. I've told you guys, when we first started Unsung, I had a short list of albums that I was like, these are like the 10 albums that I'm doing this entire thing for. And Outside the Simian Flock was one of those 10 albums, right? So I was so pleased that you were so enthused about this band.
Oh, no, honestly... I think on top of my list for bands to see live who I hadn't seen yet, it's Hives, who I'm hopefully going to see next month in Antwerp, and Millionaire.
We could seriously derail this entire podcast. But the point is, I was very, very interested to see Muse cite them as an influence.
And Deus as well.
Yeah, and Deus, exactly. Yeah. They are really, really interesting influences. They're total innovators. It's that weird thing about Belgian bands where, like, there's nothing to lose. It's like... They
sing in English. They make great noise rock that's very innovative. Actually, one of the bands that I didn't include in the Belgium episode because I knew that Fran wouldn't like them. But I'll take the chance now to shout them out. There's a band called Hypo Christmas Tree Fuzz.
Do you know, Babs, I put them on in Glasgow.
Oh, you absolute legend. Yeah, there's a lot of good Belgian bands out here, and I think, as I said in the episode, I don't understand how they're not bigger outside of Belgium.
The bands that we're talking about, they were working within sort of pop and indie parameters. They're sort of pushing the boundaries of what you can do within that and still make a pop song. And some of it's pretty extreme, but Muse did seem to sort of cherry pick some really good ideas from what was going on in that scene. And I would say one of the best ideas is that being able to saturate a guitar but not create a heavy song. The guitar is still blown out, but yet it's blown out without the song crossing over into a point where it would be alienating to some sort of mainstream audience. And I think it's something that they gradually refined. Well, certainly this album and the album after it. Muse were doing very saturated, heavy, riffy guitars that somehow translated to a mainstream audience, and it seems like those influences, like the likes of Millionaire, that seems to me a really good reference point. And I was really pleased. It's a redeeming factor in the story of Matt Bellamy that they appear in that story. However, to counterbalance that, with Black Holes and Revelations, those aforementioned dystopian themes just become somewhat unbearable to me. The aliens, the New World Order, political corruption, revolution, all that glib shit starts to really weigh the songs down. I think, like, for example, Starlight. Their fucking Buck Rogers Coldplay can just fuck right off, honestly. And Supermassive Black Hole, I get, by the way, this is the biggest streamed song online. I mean, fuck knows why. I think that weird cyberpunk thing's pretty rotten. It's like U2 for online gamers. I don't get it. And this whole period in the band's career parallels that point where Biffy Clyro also got really thirsty for mainstream success and started trying to write for an arena. They start to feel really contrived. And I didn't get that impression with Absolution, but I do get it at this point. And this is when I'm just like, scrub the hands. Okay, this band's not invited anymore.
Yeah, I remember Starlight being a big change. Like, this is something that can soundtrack an ITV1 Sunday night programme, you know.
Oh, they got massive sync, didn't they? They became a sync band. You saw them in like football highlights, then a fucking like BT advert, and then like they were so interchangeable and neutral.
And that and Supermassive Black Holes became two massive like pop songs. And I didn't like Supermassive Black Holes. It was shit Prince for me. And his vocal tone, and that's when I walked away. I like Knights of Sardinia. I like Assassins, got an interesting riff to it, but apart from I don't think I even bought this album. I think this is my exit point. And I saw them at Isle of Wight 2006, and I thought they played enough of their back cat for me to enjoy it, but I could feel it turning to a point when it was the Matt Bellamy show more than ever. Like previously, it still felt like a free piece, but on this one, he's so separated from the rest of the band. The spotlight was all on Matt the whole entire time. I was like, okay, you know, he might as well had a cape and a crown on. You know, it was so
that's
strange.
Actually another parallel with the Biffy Clyro thing, because I mean, Simon Neil is the only credited songwriter in Biffy Clyro, even though it's an original trio, and even though the other two are still invited to the party, increasingly it became like spotlight on me. My shirt is off, my tats are getting better. This was the tipping point for Muse in that same direction. It's like the Matt Bellamy show plus the two guys.
Babs, did you see them live?
So Black Holes and Revelations wasn't where I tapped out. That came a bit later. What I feel about this album is that half of it is genius and half of it is forgettable. I think the songs that I like, despite myself, I do like Starlight. It is so on the edge for me melodically because it is pop. But there's,
I'm shocked.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. I knew you'd be shocked, Fran. But like, I think I kind of have memories of singing in the car with my family as well. It's true that Starlight and Supermassive Black Hole were everywhere and overplayed. But I remember my friend Mark Abbott being like, "Have you heard the new Muse album? Have you heard this song called Knights of Sidonia?" And I was like, "No, I haven't yet." And we were at an indie disco at university, and it came on, and he dragged me to the fucking dance floor to dance to Knights of Sidonia. And that was how I first experienced it. So that was a very interesting way to experience it. And again, I think a bit with Absolution, I was like, gosh, songs like Take a Bow and Map of a Problematique I fucking love, but I forget that they exist because of the Supermassive Black Holes, Knights of Sidonia, Starlight. And I really enjoyed listening to them again. But yeah, this was the first one I was like, oh, they're going in a different direction. I think Invincible for me is the song that shows that they're going in a different direction.
And tonight we can truly say together we're invincible.
it's annoying. It builds, but I like that in earlier stuff, but it feels cynical.
Yeah.
You're talking about writing to a script. I think Invincible feels like that. Half of this album is great, half is not.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but do you think at this point that they realised we are Muse? This is what Muse represents, and therefore we should write to what is expected of us?
I think on some songs like Invincible, absolutely. I think Knights of Sidonia for me, it's in the same category as Butterflies and Hurricanes and Citizen Erased and everything else, where it's an epic, it's a film, and it still works and it moves me. Like it's Knights of Sidonia. Every time it goes to the synths and Matt's voice, and then when the guitar comes in, it's cathartic. Like I really feel it. But unfortunately,
can I ask how you dance to that song? By the way,
God knows. Fran, you're friends with me on Facebook, right? Like I posted 2 pictures that someone took of me dancing at a wedding, and I look fucking deranged and appalled. So
probably that song.
Good.
Don't forget to mention your favourite B-side from this.
The Groove. Do you guys know The Groove? I mean, again, I didn't want to add to but Muse B-side's excellent. I don't understand how The Groove isn't on this album and it wasn't a single. It has an epic fucking bass line. I'm a bass player. I'm not a good one. I know a few Muse bass lines. I enjoy Time Is Running Up because I know how to play it on bass. So, but the Groove is absolutely, if there's one takeaway from here, go and check out The Groove.
Interesting.
This is when Muse became fucking massive. They headlined 2 nights at Wembley Stadium.
Super massive, you could say.
You could say, yeah. They headlined like 2 nights at Wembley Stadium in 2007 with this record. You know what I mean? That's not.
So did Biffy, did they not?
I don't think Biffy have ever headlined.
I think it's too early for Biffy.
They did that fucking enormous Wembley Stadium show around about that time as well, I think. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah.
Don't let my long-standing grudge with Biffy Clyro. I mean, their fucking manager will just start retweeting us and shit tweeting against us.
Beef.
I mean, for me, they're jumping the shark here, right? Like in a big way. They actually cite Philip Glass as an influence, and I'm like, what? What? Are you okay, Matt? He's obviously not. But Starlight is the worst of Muse for me. The chorus is a hard cringe for me, man. The reverb on it. Assassin, see the main riff at the start of Assassin. It sounds like a boss battle in Final Fantasy on a Game Boy. It's like it's really weird, and I actually found it quite endearing.
Yeah, that makes me like it more.
Yeah, it's got a lot of Queen harmonies on it as well, and there's actually a really nice heavy riff, which is cool. Nice to Sidonia. So apparently Matt was poking fun at his dad with this song, the Tornadoes. Like that's why. So it was supposed to sound deliberately quite surfy and sci-fi westerny, because he was like, "Okay, Dad, check this out," and he decided to make it a 6-minute long song about not being taken alive and stuff. I don't think you can deny how catchy that chorus is. I think it's supposed to be.
I can try.
I think it's supposed to be ridiculous. I think the whole vibe of that song is supposed to be like a bit of fun, which you can't really say often. One of the things about Muse is, even though they come across as having a sense of humour as people, their music is so po-faced. It comes across as all very deadly serious stuff.
I'm not sure I agree with that, but I mean, I think they're quite gleefully pompous. I think when you watch some of their live arena shows, especially some of like the Japanese stuff, they're aware of a lot of the absurdity.
I mean, yeah, I would recommend to go and watch the video of them putting on Slipknot's masks. I think it's from around the Origin of Symmetry era, where I think it's Tom Howard is putting on a Slipknot mask and being like, "Fuck you!" It's there. I mean, but he is the cheekiest chappy, as I said. But yeah. I will quickly say that Harp, I think, is a great album, and I hadn't listened to it in ages. That is the last Muse album that I bought. I had no idea it was named after the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. Okay.
Well, Babs, actually that's going to play a pretty significant role in my Nexus.
But
yeah, I think what we're in now is this kind of period of this band where it becomes a bit of a mulch, right?
Yeah, it's a much of a mulch.
So the Harp comes out, it's a live record, like we fucking asked for it, and then 2009, The Resistance. This is, as I mentioned in the kind of whole Alex Jones analogy earlier on, this is where the kind of the narrative about globalism and fucking revolution and stuff sort of seems to take over to an unhealthy extent. The first track on that, Uprising, is their most streamed, almost 400 million.
We will never see the truth around. Another promise, another scene, a package like to keep us trapped in greed. All green belts wrapped around our minds and endless.
I mean, I kind of get why. It's kind of catchy, that song.
It is.
Even
so
though it's
annoying. I find it
later.
so annoying.
That keyboard is pure Doctor Who. There's fucking no doubt about it.
And I actually think the second song, Resistance, is almost a really clever bit of pop writing, but somehow they managed to make it a little bit unlikable. This was the album where, Mark, your comment about Queen really started to sink in.
This is when it happens, yeah.
This is when they sounded like they'd had a conversation and they were wondering, what the fuck are we going to do, guys? And they decided we need to try and sound like later period Queen. Maybe the reason that I hadn't picked up on it is that Muse at this stage lack any of the charisma of Queen. To me, I'm a pretty big Queen fan, albeit I get that their later stuff can get pretty patchy, but this is a sort of self-indulgent, bloated mess. This isn't the fun, sort of euphoric, carefree exploration of Queen. There's something far too considered, and Babs, you used the word cynical. I'm taking it out of context, but you know, it feels too deliberate and it misses the point of Queen. You know, it's just something that feels quite forced about it, and then set to this narrative that I find quite distasteful. The whole thing just doesn't sit well with me. I'm not really giving it a pass on any front.
I'm not buying it either. The brother needs to lay off the George Orwell, to be honest. It's fucking it's brutal chat from here on out. United States of Eurasia is supposed to be a national anthem for some fucking thing, I don't know, shite. And then our natural selection has got the riff from Newborn neutered. It's really weird. And I Belong to You has a bass line from a Kaiser Chiefs song. I'm absolutely sure of that.
That's not something you want to steal. Okay, so I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to dwell too much on the rest of this catalogue because I don't think there's
delighted because all I had was I've ignored them and I dislike Drones and Psycho with a passion. That's it.
I think, yeah, they were a silly sci-fi band. By this point, they became pretentious, and I just turned off. And also, becoming massive in America, it made no sense to me when they had less songs, and they were far less interesting than they ever were. So,
it was a really interesting point you made, though, about how that I hadn't considered, about how, you know, they became massive in America as the narrative started to shift to those kind of slightly weird, very Americanized sort of conspiracy themes that were getting big. So I guess to fly through it, Second Law 2012, but the album kicks off with an orchestra, swings into electro, it fucking sucks. There's a lot of like Queen Greatest Hits 3 harmonies on this that I don't think they necessarily nail. Chris, by the way, sings lead vocals in 2 tracks,
which are like fucking like absolute skippers, like even at the best of times, you know.
Liquid State and Save Me.
Break me up and steal what's left inside. And hope and pray iniquity has died.
I mean, but to be fair, both songs are about his struggles with alcoholism that the band had made him deal with after he threatened their income.
Supremacy should be in a James Bond film because that orchestra is so fucking overblown. It actually is basically Daniel Craig, his entire personality. And
have Muse ever done a James Bond?
I think this was.
You think they would?
That is insane that they haven't done a James Bond.
Radiohead did one and they got shut out. So if Radiohead got shut out, I feel like Muse would get shut out as well.
Fucking hell! I mean, how the fuck does Billie Eilish get a fucking Bond team?
I don't mind hers. I don't mind hers, but she does because she's the millennial Generation Z queen.
I've just noticed that around this time they were touring with 30 Seconds to Mars. I mean, that says enough about Muse for me.
If they weren't already ruined, Jared Leto ruins everything he touches, so that's fine. Drones 2015 starts off trying to be Queen. It's unavoidable for now. They're like a slick, soulless Queen. I don't think the band really have a single forgivable tune for this point onwards. And, you know, for my money, I would say that's probably been the case for a while, but I'm being charitable. The absolutely fucking abysmal cover art on this album does not help it at all. I mean, if you haven't seen this, for a long time I thought it was Mickey Mouse's like gloved hand playing a video game. And so it was some sort of like absurd commentary on like Disney or US media corporations or something. The thing is, it turns out that the sophistication level of the narrative is only about on that level anyway. It's horrible. The whole fucking narrative of the record is horrible. I've used the word glib so many times, but it seizes upon this notion of drone warfare and Obama and the sort of the disappointment that went along with being this, you know, the great liberal hope using these nefarious methods. It's like, fuck off, Muse. Like, honestly, it's so fucking cheap as a theme. If you guys have anything to add in this, let me know, but I just wanted for...
No, I agree. I think it is Muse. It's Muse thinking they're cleverer than they are. Yeah. They think they have something meaningful to say, and lyrics-wise they don't.
Yeah, it's lazy as fuck, and it plays into the hands of every fucking tedious, angsty American woke teenager at the time. So I'm not necessarily that surprised that they started to get more traction over there. And then Simulation Theory 2018. So I don't know if you caught this at all, right? But
I will say quickly, I don't mind this because at least they were trying something different. You know, like at least they tried for something different. Like Algorithm and Pressure, I think are decent tracks. The rest of it's a mess. Yeah. But at least they were trying to do something different after 15 years. I think if Muse had a flop album around 2011, it would have been the best thing for them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The fact that they kept having success after success meant, why change? And that's the problem. You know, they needed a flop album to rethink.
Yeah.
Perhaps, yeah. So there is a key thing though, right? In 2018, in an interview with The Independent, Matt asserted that Muse's audience is constantly 5 years behind the band, and it takes time for them to get, inverted commas, what the band are doing.
What a prick.
So, to me, it's really fucking ironic that Muse seem to be constantly chasing and pilfering from prosperous like musical trends and groups. I mean, that pattern extends right the way back from their beginnings with like bleached hair doing Nirvana covers through all those early Radiohead comparisons and all the way up to this. I mean, they get to this album, and Fran, I appreciate that you said different and you didn't say new, because they suddenly get here and they start ripping off Perturbator bass lines years after Synthwave had already come back. And in fact, not only had Synthwave come back, but it had already fallen back out of favour and just been like co-opted into sort of mid-budget soundtracks for genre movies and horror films and stuff like that. And the streaming figures in this record, I think they can't be good. If you're in the band, you must be a little bit disheartened.
It's not like tens of millions, but every single song.
Yeah, but I mean, when you compare that to like some of their earlier scores,
I think this got to number 12 in America, and the previous was number 1, so it was a big dive.
Exactly, yeah, and they're trying. Yeah, I admit they're trying some diverse things, but they're not hitting the mark a lot of the time. Pressure, yeah, I will say the chorus isn't awful, but that's about the nicest thing I can say about that. As you said, perhaps that is correct. They're a band that just got constantly rewarded, and maybe like a little shock to the system would have knocked them back into a more positive direction. But
I don't think it would have pierced through, because even if, say, the critics don't like it, and I don't know what the critics have been saying about Muse since 2009, they now have such a big hardcore of fans that they're protected from it. Even I'd kind of forgotten that they had the CD set called Origin of Muse, which has all these demos and stuff, which as an early Muse fan, I was like, I'd actually be quite keen on that. The cheapest one I found was €350. And it's like, whoa. As much as I love Muse, I'm not. I'm not early Muse, I'm not going to go and pay that. But
there's 2 songs on this. One that's co-written with Timbaland and one that's co-written with Shellback, which is just staggering. I didn't even know Timbaland was still a thing. You know,
no!
Especially when they say fans are 5 years behind, and they've got Timbaland from 2007.
Timbaland produced Bjork. Timbaland is like, I will absolutely defend Timbaland, because I think he's a great producer. He's done songs with the Hives.
He's also done an album of Duran Duran. This is fucking terrible. Don't move on.
What I was going to say about this, the song I did was Propaganda, and it's got like trap electro drums and stuff on it, so it sounds really odd for Muse. Like, it's bizarre. And the Shellback song has got that big blown out Kelly Clarkson big chorus vibe to the guitars. It's just, I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? It's got a really awful, annoying female vocal in it as well, which is just making a sound, not even singing words. Yeah, and there's auto-tune in his voice. Of all the people in the world that need auto-tune in his voice, fucking Matt Bellamy is not one of them. It's a completely baffling decision on every level.
Right, okay, so we're going into a pretty despondent place. I would suggest we lighten the mood, and Fran and Babs, you lead us through the unrecognised genius of the Origin of Symmetry.
So I would say Origin of Symmetry is my favourite Muse album, despite, all the nice things I was saying about Showbiz and the others. Every song at some point has been my favourite song. Even some of the latest songs, some of the slower songs that I normally wouldn't get into, when you hear them out of context, outside of the other songs, I think it's a near perfect album. And having listened back to it and analysing it, it merges kind of classical music, synths, riffs, and flamenco guitar. So I don't know many other bands that are doing that. And I think it's not your average sort of prog rock band. I hadn't realised that it was produced by Dave Bottrell, who produced Tool, as well as John Leckie. And because, of the Matt Bellamy is mental aspect, I've got some quotes. So Matt said, "We were all off our faces on mushrooms when we recorded Plug In Baby. There was this big field next to the recording studio filled with them, so we ate them all. I don't know what we were doing, but we all ended up naked in a jacuzzi, and I went deaf in one ear from falling asleep in the sauna." He also said, some people will think it's a load of pretentious wank. Some people will like it because it's different. So, something for everyone there. And, we're going to be analysing it. But Matt Bellamy also said, it's all random. It just comes out. I've got no idea what I'm singing about at all. It does mean something, trust me. But I can't work it out myself because I'm subjective, you see. So I can't actually quite work it out. That's for you lot to work out. On that note.
I love it when a lyricist sort of retrofits meaning into his abstract lyrics.
Absolutely.
There's nothing better. Before you go into the songs, one thing is, I hate the cover of this, and yet somehow, because of the quality of the record, it's attained a significance. You see, there's a remix of this, so that's going to be an issue in this conversation anyway. They completely remixed this, didn't they? But also they remixed the artwork, because it's the same theme, but completely upgraded with digital art instead of... That's quite a cool touch.
A heavy part of my notes comes into the fact that a lot of the songs of the remix just sound so much better. Like, the original is so compressed in places, whereas I think there's a lot more room and space in the remix. Songs like, we'll get to Citizen Erased and Megalomania just sound so much better in the remix than they do in the original, I think.
I think this is why this album's kind of important to the Muse audience. It's always the album that Muse go back to, they have anniversary concerts, they have anniversary albums. To me, I wasn't a big fan of Showbiz because I thought it was, a bit retrograde, but this was, in 2001, a massive step up from other indie bands like Elbow, Star Sailor, Travis, Coldplay. That was the scene, and this was a kick in the face, really. I mean, there wasn't many bands who were doing, plug-in babies and newborns in 2001, and that's why, to me, it became quite important, because it was something very, very different to the world. But apart from, we had new metal for your heavy guitar, but in the UK, it wasn't really much of a thing. And that's why, to me, I think it's their most significant album.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. Yeah.
Let's dip into the tracks.
So, Newborn, for me, one of the most intriguing album openers, because it starts light, piano and keys, then bass, then drums, then falsetto, then riff. And the way that it ends with the synths and his distorted voice, I think is quite original, sets the tone for what the album's going to be. I truly have no idea what it's about, and look forward to hearing what you think it's about.
What is a birth squeeze? That's what I want to know.
Oh, wait.
I don't know.
A lot of people reckon that this lyrically is the Matrix, hence why all the rebirths and that sort of thing. But it's hard for me to not say anything more than Babs. I kind of think this is the big brother of Sunburn from like going from that piano intro into
Absolutely. This is like a muscular version of Sunburn. Yeah.
And like I said before, I think that bass line has been an influence on many bands at the moment, and it's like, it's one of their best songs and a perfect introduction to the album.
If you're introducing somebody to Muse, this is a great fusion of the melodrama, the falsettos, the crunchy rock sensibilities. It's a really nice meeting point and nice quantities of their various influences. And I think even later in their career, and I'm probably one of them, people that loathe Muse's later stuff can still sometimes be loath to criticise them as heavily because of stuff like this. They think, well, then again, I mean, I hate Muse, but then there is stuff like Newborn and it's pretty cracking, and it kind of has bought them a lot of favour in the long term. I think they've got a lot of mileage out of this song and the songs like it, because it is really good and it was a breath of fresh air. And when they started getting compared to stuff like Coldplay, there's stuff on this that sounds exactly like Rage Against the Machine, so it was a huge change, and it put them into, I think one of the key things about this album is it put them into Kerrang, not into NME. And that was a big broadening of their demographic as well. Can I just throw a little bit of trivia into this as well? Like, when Muse played the Big Day Out in 2004, Metallica played that Big Day Out. Metallica had a rehearsal tent of their own. So they had a rehearsal tent built at the backstage. And when Muse came off stage, they heard Metallica warming up playing Newborn.
Wow.
That's pretty cool. I didn't know. But I just like how ridiculous and bombastic this is. It's Muse turned up to 11, which is exactly what they had to do. Like, it put them in Kerrang, it made them different from Coldplay, it made them different from all the other bands. And on the remix version of it, it's not as heavy because it's not as compressed. It's got much more space, it breathes more, and I think it actually works better as a result. The guitar sounds a wee bit more Rage Against the Machine, which is a big feature throughout this whole album.
It's funny that you say Rage Against the Machine, because I never made that connection, but bass-wise especially, you're right.
Wait, like, honestly, there's a track later on that couldn't be more Rage Against the Machine if it tried. The one that it's not, though, is Bliss, the second one, which I think is actually the moment for me where Muse became like space rock. Yeah. I know there was lots of like flashes of it in that first record, but the arpeggiator in this as well sets the tone for a lot of what they would go on to do. I think the key change in that one is really good. It's not overcooked, and the overall balance between down-to-earth indie and the grandiose is fairly well judged as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of the most electric. I was surprised when I first heard this. It does kind of like stick out in the album, but that bass line still makes it Muse. I think that bass line makes it still fit in with the album. But like, I think for maybe a decade, I sang the chorus as "Give me bliss" rather than peace because it's called Bliss. Literally. But yeah, the video, I found the videos for this album were absolutely terrible. I will have to add that. And I fucking hated watching Matt Bellamy fall through that fucking wormhole for how long it was.
That's what I was going to say. That's my memory of this song. Like, I feel like this was maybe the first Muse video I saw, like Flamehead, Matt Bellamy falling forever. Kind of reminding me a little bit, I guess, of Pure Morning by Placebo in similar vibes.
That washed out look they will have as well.
Yeah. It's a funny one to come back to, because I think because of the success of Newborn, Plug and Baby and Feeling Good, I think the song has been a little bit forgotten. But for me, I like it just as much as those, although I think Mark disagrees from what he said before.
I really think it's great. To me, it sounds like a laser beam, which it's basically an 80s prog rock song, but I think this was a single, because it's a total 80s throwback for me. And
I think a bigger throwback is Space Dementia, the third one. Yeah. I think the Pink Floyd influence in that song is just writ so large. The ending in that was a clever decision, the big bombastic ending. Did you know as well, a little bit of trivia, in Space Dementia, apparently towards the end, Matt Bellamy used his trouser zipper as an instrument. It's in there somewhere. Unless they're trolling us.
Layered.
Very layered.
Have you heard the classical music it's completely ripping off?
No.
It's a piece of Rachmaninoff, and I think I saw on YouTube, like, someone literally showed the original, and it's like, oh, okay, that's just taken and put in the song. But I guess, he did that quite often in his career, hasn't he, really?
Yeah.
But I think that looking through Wikipedia, he now does mention this is from Elgar, this is from Bach a bit more.
They used to go on stage to Prokofiev as well, didn't they?
Yeah, I think is at the beginning of Hot is Prokofiev.
Mark, have you heard the remix version of this? Because this is quite different on the new version.
Absolutely,
it's
man.
got, like, strings behind it.
The strings are just gone in the original, but in this they're like big and prominent, and it makes it sound huge. Like I think they recorded the string section in Abbey Road for this. It's just a string quartet, but it gives the song another dynamic, and it plays a lovely counter melody at the piano, which you just don't hear in the original. It's a really clever bit of writing, actually. And the chorus for me is like an anti-chorus. It's not quite catchy, but it's the way the keyboards pop in the middle eight. It's got some really nice vocals. There's a chorus of oohs with harmonies in it, which you just don't get in the original either, but you totally hear that in the remix. It just pops out.
And once again, to beat the same drum, the piano is so misleading at the beginning, so tentative, and then, it builds and builds and ends in this bombastic way. I really like this song live because he really fucking gets into the piano and goes a bit crazy. And in terms of the lyrics, I've written, guessing it's about being in love with a difficult alien or something, and wondered if anyone had anything to add. And for the next one, Hyper Music, I've asked if it's the same protagonist. Yeah, he seems to be talking to the same person. I don't know.
Yeah, the songs almost play into each other as well. They almost play like back to back.
Hyper Music. Much more direct, kind of rocky banger, some great changes of direction in it, especially the chorus. That chorus, decontextualized, is just a Hendrix spanky riff. I mean, in the setting of Muse, it obviously acquires a different significance, but it really does sound like something Hendrix would have done. And he's a big Hendrix fan as well. So the bass line in this one really drives the song. I mean, they're a power trio, aren't they? So, and I think the overall remix sound of this is much fuller, and big climactic messy rock ending, which I think actually was a little reminder to me of, this was the band that used to smash up the stage at the end all the time. I mean, I think there was one tour where Muse had like a record of like 150 odd guitars smashed in one tour. I mean, it's nice work if you can get it, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm a bit less sympathetic to that these days, but I thought it was interesting how this became, or was also, hypochondriac music on Hullabaloo, which totally gave it a different quiet flavour. And I like both, but I think just the pure rocking out of this one is makes it one of my favourites on the album.
Do you not think that it sounds a bit like Taxman by the Beatles?
Let me tell you how it will be. There's one for you, 19 for me.
Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, actually.
If you listen back to it does.
I think I need to go and listen to that again.
Sorry.
You're ruining Muse for everyone, Fran.
Yeah, now you think about it, I can actually hear that. Yeah, that's interesting.
I agree. And for the next song, Plug-in Baby, I think that on listening back to it, the riff is so famous that I think people forget how good the distorted bass on it is as well. The bass is driving. yeah, it's just Chris Wolstenheim is so good. And again, I mean, I think we mentioned this in last week's episode, but the drums are good, but really the guitar, piano, and bass is what I'm focusing on, and Plug-in Baby for sure.
This was the strongest bit of writing to date when it came out. I think it was the best use of his voice. His range was really well used in this. It didn't sound overdone or hammy. Also, in some of the takes, he really spits out the lyrics in the chorus, like the word plug-in in a couple of them. You can actually hear like the plosive goes to almost the point of like having to wipe down the microphone after he's done it, I'm sure. And that riff, it picked up so many awards over the years just for innovation.
Do you know what's
a really great riff.
Really interesting about that riff? When I used to get when I first started getting guitar lessons when I was wee, my guitar teacher was like, "Oh, see that Plug-in Baby riff? That's the exact same riff in a David Bowie song played by Robert Fripp. Like it's a really weird mode. It's in a really strange mode for a pop song.
It became like Stairway to Heaven for our generation. I remember at university, like everyone would be on an acoustic guitar trying to play a shit version of Plug-in Baby. Like, everyone wanted to play that riff at a time. But sorry, I don't want to spoil this song for you guys, but also listening to it recently, that bass line is very, very similar to Sexy Boy by Air.
It is. You're right.
It is.
Yeah.
And it did come after us. I'm not saying they ripped off.
we need to do this episode again and just go. Who have they ripped off? Who are they ripping off today?
Well, in the next song, they ripped off Rage Against the Machine. If you've ever listened to Rage Against the Machine, Citizen Erased, I mean, it could easily be, certainly from the second Rage album, Evil Empire, it could easily be from that. It's not to say it's not a much more multifaceted thing, but that main guitar part is a carbon copy. Interestingly, the remix of this is by far the most streamed track from the remix album, so I'm guessing that means that it probably was one of the ones that was seen to have benefited the most. It's a fairly textbook example of Muse from those first 5 years, that combination of like the OTT and the Baroque and then the big overblown riffy guitar lines. The Radiohead comparisons are probably pretty justified in the verse melodies, but I do think that extreme falsetto that they use in the chorus was actually quite cleverly used, because it took a chance with that. I still don't entirely understand what he was thinking with that meandering guitar solo. I think it's about 2 minutes 10 into it. There's like a little guitar thing. It just sounds wrong. It doesn't sound wrong in a right way. It sounds wrong in a wrong way. And then it's got that big blissed out sort of piano-led Beatles type Sgt. Pepper Day in the Life outro thing at the end.
This is the best Muse song, in my opinion. There is no better Muse song than this one.
This is my second favourite on the album after Newborn.
It's their best non-single, definitely.
I think it's superb, man. The remix especially makes it sound even better with the strings and just the general mix of it. I think are just fucking honestly so good. See, my favourite part is it. See when he plays the riff on his own in the third bar, and the drummer just catches it and comes out. I think that's a really, really clever bit of songwriting, man.
Well, there's a quote again from Matt Bellamy about it. So he says, Dom came in one day with this funky James Brown beat and Chris just started playing along. I then applied the chord structure that I already had and it suddenly became a full-on metal track out of nowhere. Because it was so heavy for so long, we decided to add another song on to the end of it. So that's what I mean. Yeah, for me, it absolutely works. It's filmic. It's... so loud. Then you have the bridge. And I quite like the guitar solo. And then after all of that, the washing away section at the end with the instrumental build, brilliant.
And this is like one of the reasons why the American label refused to release it, because of all the falsettos and the length of the song.
Really?
They basically told them they wanted to get rid of this and to change how he sings Plug-in Baby. and that's why they told them to do one, basically.
Is that why it took so long to be released in the US?
Yeah, well, I reckon officially it's never been released. I think it came out in maybe 2005 unofficially, but I assume this remix album's the first time it's been officially released in America.
Wow.
I'm surprised it was this one where the false letters were the issue, because with the next one that leads directly from Citizen Raising Microcuts, he is high and it's great. In my opinion.
I mean, this is the opposite end of the Muse spectrum, isn't it? Extremely baroque. This feels more in keeping with, do you remember the band JG72?
Yeah.
It reminds me more of that kind of thing. I mean, it is an extremely bold decision in that vocal, but oh my god, it must grate like fuck for people who are not fans of the band. This could have been used in Guantanamo Bay for people that are not fans of Muse.
For the Backstreet Boys, which was what was used, right?
And Rage Against the Machine.
Oh, Rage Against the Machine.
I mean, as far as midway markers on an album go, it's more original, for example, than just putting on a ballad, certainly. And I think that huge guitar riff at the end was a clever touch, because it's a polarising song and it kind of drags it back. You know, for some people it maybe rescues it a wee bit. Interesting decision. I'm not a huge fan of it though.
No, I love it, and what I quite like is that you think after the epicness of Citizen Erased, okay, this is going to be a bit quieter. No, not at all. So, and I quite like the jumping between the time signatures as well, because that wrong foots you.
Yeah.
The second part of it is definitely where it gets going, though, for me. Like, the melody on the guitar is nothing how he sings. And to be able to do both at the same time is like, as someone who can play some guitar, it's really fucking hard to do two different melodies at the same time.
Yeah.
So you got to give him some sort of, you know.
It is impressive, yeah. Track 8, the Screenager. This is Muse at their meandering, wibbly best, but I don't dig it.
I don't dig it either.
It's too Muse. I think the album sags quite badly here, actually, if I'm being honest. Dominic Howard has also claimed, again, it could be an act of trolling, that they used llama toenails as instruments in this song.
Used what?
Llama toenails, like llamas, the animal.
Oh,
right.
Toenails. The clipped toenails of llamas.
Oh, toenails. I heard toenails, and I was like, is this some fancy instrument I've never heard of?
No, llama toenails.
Right, okay.
To me, it sounds like, you know, a thumb harp that's been muted. It sounds like someone's pressing on a thumb harp and they're using that, but he maintained in interviews that it was llama's toenails.
What does a llama's toenail look like?
Let's all go Google image search it now.
maybe llamas don't even have nails. Maybe that's the joke.
I like the Latin rhythms and the spidery piano riff, but this wasn't one of the best tracks off the album. Babs, are you a bigger fan?
Yeah, I was going to say, I go back to what I said at the beginning. So Screenager and the next one, Dark Shines, were absolutely for me the ones I liked the least. But then I think because they are just quieter songs, I really recommend listening to them not in the context of this album. And also, I have much better headphones now. Didn't realise there were wind chimes at the beginning. It's very delicate. And I don't think I'd realised that there is a backwards guitar. The do-do-do-do-do-do. I think there's some effects there or afterwards. I like the tense chorus and the, you know, Muse Love and Arpeggio. I do like this, but I have to be in the mood for this. As for the next one, Dark Shines.
Yeah, so Dark Shines continues that sagging for me.
And your innocence I will consume.
I'll be honest, going back to it, I didn't remember this from my first time round with this album when it came out. It does a lot of the same moves as the other songs, but in my opinion, it doesn't do them quite as well.
It makes me feel queasy, this song.
Wow, strong.
It's just something about the chorus. It's got a weird rattly feeling to it, which makes me feel a bit sick. I don't know what that's all about.
I mean, it's quite disturbing, and I've put deranged piano that comes before the chorus. I quite like it, and again, hadn't really realised the flamenco influence here either until listening back to it. And I mean, I just think it's a very original combination of sounds and genres.
It doesn't really go back to the old Spanish guitar much after this, does it really? No. It's like he does two sort of Latino sort of tracks and moves on forever.
A little bit in like Assassin, you know. There are a few songs where there's definitely a flamenco / Arabic influence, but not as straightforward as this. No, I don't think so.
Babs, you mentioned the word original. You know it's not original? Track 10.
Sun in the sky, you know how I feel. Drifting on by, you know how I feel. It's a new dawn.
Track 10. I was like, what? Track 10, yes.
Yeah, I mean, so Feeling Good, the cover version. Yes, Matt Bellamy's voice kind of suits this song. It was a big single for the band, but honestly, I never, even from the time when it came out, I never really gave much of a fuck about it. Felt it was really quickly overused in TV interludes and fucking sports highlights and adverts. Got kind of sick into it. I've just generally never, with cover versions, been much of a fan of people who just take the original and make it a bit rockier. It doesn't really do that much for me. On the remix, I will say the synths are a lot louder, and it gives the remix has another dynamic to it that the original didn't have. Or the original Muse original, not the original. Do you know what I mean?
Had you guys heard the original, the Nina Simone version before the Muse one?
Yeah.
Or not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes, definitely.
See, no, yeah. I had not. This was the first one that I heard. So for me, it does feel like the original in a way, and I prefer it. And unlike you, Chris, I do like a rocky or a synthy cover, you know, where they do take it. And I think Muse are very good at covers, especially Please Let Me Get What I Want, I Can't Take My Eyes Off of You, and House of the Rising Sun. It's a weird selection though. I feel like Origin of Symmetry is fairly concepty, or, you know, songs lead into one another. This feels like a weird inclusion of a song for this album and a weird position for the song on the album. I think
when I heard the album, I never thought this would be a single in a million years. But this seemed to be at one point the biggest hit. Like this was played a lot.
I definitely agree that it was overused. Absolutely.
And you know how I feel. It's a new dawn. It's a new day. It's a new life for me.
Yeah, it must have the most sync in terms of sync money, you know. But I think also quite often bands are talked into putting cover versions on albums by labels or by management looking to court labels as a way to shift the record if the rest of the album's a little bit challenging. And so you get the feeling that might have been part of the decision, and then just because they liked how it turned out, they chose to keep it. I'm not entirely sure. It doesn't really chime with the rest of the theme on this. It's quite an original sounding album, so it feels incongruous thematically as well. Now, there's a wee bit of an issue here, okay, because this is where we run into this thing about online versions, real life versions, reissues. Megalomania on the original, track 11. If you then look at the re-release, the remix, it's Futurism that comes in here. Futurism wasn't even on the original, I understand.
No,
Can you guys parse this for us?
Yeah, I think Futurism was a B-side. I don't know for which song. I'm going to have to look it up unless someone else knows.
It was released with the Japanese version of the album only as well, on the end of it.
So in that remix, they juggled that about a wee bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think on at least the first 4 Muse albums, they've added songs in the digital versions, like you said. So in Showbiz, they've added Spirostatic. And there's now Fury, I think, at the end of Absolution, and Glorious at the end of Black Holes and Revelations. And I guess it's Muse, more than many other bands, the B-sides are so popular that I guess it makes sense. And I bloody love Futurism and can play it very badly on bass. I think of their B-sides to put in here, or their, not B-sides, different songs, it's good. But Megalomania is a great album closer, so I feel like it makes much more sense for it to finish on Megalomania.
Yeah, I was going to say that regardless of your thinking on Futurism as a track, it feels a better fit at number 11 on the reissue, and Megalomania feels a better closer.
Absolutely.
It's a much more cinematic song. It sounds so much better on the remix.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's just night and day with this one. Some of the other ones, it's not that big a difference. This one is huge. It's very Morricone-esque as well. The only thing is, does the album need it? I think actually if you wanted a poppier, more directly successful album, they would just have finished on Feeling Good, because it's got a big stomping end. And I know you're a huge fan here, Babs. You're never going to subscribe to this perspective.
No.
But I just think these Megalomania and Futurism are just totally surplus to requirements for me at this point.
It's fine.
I think the band said that they Hysteria is basically Futurism remixed. They basically took the riff from Futurism and did it for Hysteria because they enjoyed it, but they wanted to do a better version.
Makes sense.
Surprised they included it on the original album, because if that's like a demo version of a later single, it's strange that they want to include it. I think Megalomania does work as an ending because I enjoy the organ sound and the big like cathedral-esque end to it. It feels very pretentious. It feels very Muse.
Sorry, see that organ sound, now that you mention it, do you know that before they were allowed to record that, the priest at the church where they did it demanded to investigate the band to make sure they weren't devil worshippers?
That doesn't surprise me. Yeah, I agree with Fran. I think not only the organ, but him harmonising with himself, which doesn't really happen. It is pure Muse. Pretension, sure. I don't care. I think they're one of the few bands that they can be pretentious, but for me it works. But I would still totally agree that Futurism, it feels more like an opener than a closer, even though Newborn for this album is much better. So I would put Futurism maybe somewhere in the middle.
For me, Megalomania, the chorus is completely overblown, and that's why I love it. It's just pure 70s madness. For me, it really hints towards what they would do in The Resistance and Black Holes and Revelations, I think. It's got the big languid strings, it's got a lot of neoclassical influence. It's just so pompous, and they would become very pompous as our career, as we've discussed, as our career would go on, with Black Holes and Revelations and The Resistance and on. This is a huge hint towards what they would do, and they don't really visit that on Absolution very much. I mean, at the time, you wouldn't have guessed they were going to become the band they became, but now that you look back, you're like, oh yeah, it kind of started here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, look, I certainly have not pulled my punches across the duration of our time together here, okay? I have tried my best, Babs, to undermine your clearly long-standing adulation of this group. Fran, you seem a bit more moderate in your support for them, but my opinions on this record, not on Muse, are it's strong, it's bold, it's far from perfect, but it's got some really brave ideas on it. I think it's notable that the band used it to kick away from Radiohead comparisons by virtue of those really fat guitar sounds and the proggy space rock moments. Like I said, they became a Kerrang group, not an NME, Vox, Mojo group, whatever. It was certainly one of the most exciting releases that year. But as I said, I think the band more generally have aged terribly. I think they've increasingly latched on to some of the worst and most annoying bits of their early career. The things that at this stage, at the Origin of Symmetry stage, were fine because they were dilute. They were in amongst all these other influences, the falsettos, the pretentiousness. I don't mind the pretentiousness because it's balanced out by a kind of punky, rocky energy. But as they got bigger, they seemed to lean into that. I think just generally their entire catalogue is slightly oversung, both literally and metaphorically. I might have been prepared to give them the benefit of the doubt, given how impressive an album this is in its own right, and the fact as well that I did, as I mentioned, indulge some guilty pleasures in the Absolution with Hysteria and Stockholm Syndrome especially. But as I've laid out at length, Muse peddles so much red pill garbage as well, and pander to a side of contemporary culture that I personally find quite nefarious, even though I don't think they're particularly malicious or I don't think there's a lot of intent, but I think it requires a bit of neglect to be able to still court that. I'm glad to have actually had this opportunity to consolidate my feelings on Muse, because fuck Muse. Fuck them right off. Sorry.
Will not support that statement. Though I can agree with some elements, of course. I do think this album, for me, it's near perfect. Especially an album that can trick me into finding the slow songs good. I mean, very, very few albums do that for me, especially rock albums. But there is something that happened for me post Black Holes and Revelations where Muse went wrong. That here, for me, the balance is fantastic, and the blend of all the different elements that we talked about are perfect. But then something happened. Was it fame? Was it money? Was it label pressure? And they've just become crap stadium rock, and it really makes me sad.
Yeah, I think back in 2005, I would listen to like bootleg versions of live recordings just to hear like a new song. I was like desperate to hear new Muse. And now I will flick through on Spotify and then move on forever. Sadly, that is Muse 2021 is like, oh, they're still going. Okay. But back in the day, you know, I pretty much bought every single single. I adored this and Absolution. I remember I lived in Seattle in 2003 and I downloaded Absolution, and I was walking around downtown Seattle listening to Absolution, knowing that I was the only person probably in America listening to that album. And I thought, oh, I'm listening to Muse, check him out, guys. and you know, now I'll be slightly embarrassed. But yeah, you know, I saw them do this album at Reading 2002, and I have that fond memory forever, and I will walk away knowing that I have that memory.
I really enjoyed this, listening to it again. I enjoyed it when it came out. I really enjoyed listening to it again. I have no time for Muse after this record at all, really. I mean, I like a few things in Absolution, but it's way more miss than hit for me, that record, as we discussed. And then afterwards they can just get right in the fucking bin. But this moment for me is... Yeah, man, I think this should go in discography, because I do think in the context of catalogue it is unsung, and they don't even play much. They rarely play stuff from it live, even Newborn now. I think they personally have moved on from being this kind of band into being, I don't know, whatever the fuck they are now. And I don't know, this record works for me, and the remix gave it a whole new element, which made me appreciate it in a different way. And a good remix does that. I think good remixes are quite difficult to come by anyway. I think this one does that very well. So for me, I guess my seal of approval is the only good Muse record, and the only time that were good in their career for me.
So that makes 1, 2, 3 thumbs up.
Yeah.
And me makes 2 thumbs down.
It's a win.
So if you agree with us or disagree with us, you go onto your Twitter and vote on if this goes into your discography or not. That's Unsung Pod on Twitter. And now we move to the Nexus, which is the part of the show where we basically do 6 degrees of separation from a chosen individual to Muse. And this week our chosen individual is Terry Fox.
Courtesy of Doki Doki Panfish on Twitter again. First, we've had to pull Doki Doki out twice in 2 months, I think.
A complicated series of connections between different things.
Terry Fox, Terence Stanley Fox, a Canadian athlete. I had to look this up. Canadian athlete, humanitarian and cancer research activist. In 1980, with one leg having been amputated due to cancer, he embarked on an east to west across Canada run to raise money and awareness for cancer research. Although the spread of his cancer eventually forced him to end his quest after 143 days and 5,373 kilometres, fucking hell, and ultimately cost him his life. His efforts resulted in a lasting worldwide legacy. The annual Terry Fox Run, first held in 1981, has grown to involve millions of participants in over 60 countries and is now the world's largest one-day fundraiser for cancer research. Over $800 million has been raised as of 2020 for that absolute fucking legend. Wow. Thanks Doki Doki, because I hadn't heard of Terry Fox, and he is a real piece of work. What a guy. Fran, would you like to go first?
Okay, so this is Muse to Terry Fox, yeah?
It is indeed.
Okay, so I went number 1 UK albums.
Okay.
I then found Rod Stewart, Tonight I'm Yours, and he dedicated a song to Terry Fox in the album with Never Give Up Your Dream, and that's how you get to Terry
Wow.
Fox.
Holy shit, man.
In 4 steps. Thank you very much.
Wow, that's much shorter than mine.
Yeah, that's
Mic drop.
yeah, that's it. You can be absolved from ever doing the Nexus again. You've done your time.
So I'm going Muse to Terry Fox rather than Terry Fox to Muse.
Yes,
You've got Muse to Terry Fox. Doing Terry Fox to Muse would be called doing a mark, and you don't want to be in that. You don't want to be in that club.
Okay. All right. So here's how I did it. So Simulation Theory is an album by Muse. Computer Simulation is a process of mathematical modelling. The fashion designer Oswald Boateng studied computer science at Southgate College when he was 16. He was in the film Absolutely Fabulous, the movie, as was Jennifer Saunders, who is a notable person from Lincolnshire. A place called Woolsthorpe by Colsterworth is in Lincolnshire. That's where Isaac Newton was born. Isaac Newton was the first animated Google Doodle in January 2010, and Terry Fox was celebrated with a Google Doodle in September 2020.
Jesus. That went in so many different directions. Wow.
Mark,
Yep.
you or me?
I'll go. Mine's just quite short. In the video for the song Pressure from Muse's latest album, Simulation Theory, stars Mr. Terry Crews, who is just a really lovely man. He also starred in a film called The Alibi with James Marsden, and that film was actually written by Noel Hawley, who was the writer of Fargo and the TV series in Legion. The film also starred Rebecca Romijn. Both James Marsden and Rebecca Romijn starred in a bunch of X-Men films. James Marsden played Cyclops, Rebecca Romijn played Mystique, and Iceman was played by Sean Ashmore, who played Terry Fox in a TV film called Terry. There you go.
All right. Very good.
Okie dokie. Oh my god, I'm going to tread in Fran's toes a bit. Muse released the Harp live album video thing in 2008. Harp, HAARP, the High Frequency Active Oral Research Program, operates out of Gakona in Alaska and is a research program designed to analyse the ionosphere. The goal is apparently to understand the physics of the ionosphere, which is affected by the sun. Solar flares obviously send solar particles towards Earth and can disrupt communications and electrical grids, and therefore the thinking is that if we understand what happens in the ionosphere, we can maybe mitigate some of those problems. Now, conspiracy theorists, friends of mine, especially when I'm doing the Nexus, think HAARP's purpose is far more sinister than meets the eye, because of course they do. The programme has been blamed for everything from global warming to natural disasters to loud humming noises in the sky. Basically, if you name any kind of natural phenomenon or disaster, somebody probably suspects HAARP of being behind it. Conspiracy theorists, for example, suggested that HAARP was to blame for the 2011 earthquake and tsunami in Japan, the huge Moore, Oklahoma tornado in 2013, a massive landslide that happened in the Philippines in 2006, and others still say that HAARP controls people's minds and alters the very fabric of reality. Wow. Also, in 2010, Hugo Chavez, leader of Venezuela at the time, late leader, claimed that HAARP, or a program like it, triggered the Haiti earthquake. After the Haiti earthquake in 2010, one of the first US vessels to bring medical aid and supplies in the form of like clean water, food, shelters, was the USS Higgins, which left from US Naval Base San Diego. This next step is an absolute belter. I'm sorry, Fran, I'm stealing a wee bit your thunder. In 2012, Mr. Rod Stewart finally decided to address a long-standing bit of celebrity lore. This is a wee bit like the Richard Gere gerbil myth. Rod Stewart was said to have been admitted to hospital in the early 80s to have copious amounts of semen pumped out of his stomach after he, inverted commas, serviced a series of sailors from that same US naval base San Diego. Apparently the story actually stems, I mean, Rod laughed this off, it stems from a disgruntled ex-publicist, and Rod to this day acknowledges it was actually a pretty inspired move as far as revenge tactics go. Supposedly the publicist had ended up having to share a hotel room with Rod's 7-year-old son during a tour due to the hotel being overbooked. He wasn't too happy about that. During that evening, the publicist had gone out, met a guy, brought him back to the hotel room, and clearly Rod fired him for bringing a partner back to a hotel room he was sharing with his son. So the guy got the bullet, was really pissed off and started this giant rumour that spread like wildfire during the early 80s about Rod giving BJs to loads and loads of sailors. Anyway, Rod took it in good spirits, so to speak, and he did certainly name a song, Never Give Up on a Dream, in honour of Terry Fox. But not only that, in 1981-82, Rod Stewart named the entire tour of Canada the Terry Fox Tour out of respect.
Oh,
Wow.
lovely.
Double Rod Stewart. Who would have thought it?
Yeah.
There you go. Wow, a Muse marathon to rival any marathon Terry Fox ever undertook. I would say that despite having two legs, I found this a harder marathon than Terry Fox's.
Thanks, Chris.
He died. I got a migraine. I think that's similar.
Oh dear.
Fran, Babs, it was a challenging suggestion. I thoroughly enjoyed the gauntlet that was thrown down. I feel like I've managed to get a lot of things off my chest that have been sitting there for far too long. I'm just sorry that in our first meeting you guys were the brunt of that.
No, it's fine. Honestly, I had such a great time preparing for. I had the opposite experience where I was like, this is so good. I get to listen to all of Muse because, I mean, I was privileged as well because I was like, I think I'll get away with not listening to the last 4 albums because, you know, these guys have said they're going to talk about the discography. So I'm just going to say it's all shit and hopefully they will help. So I think if I'd have had to go through that, maybe I wouldn't have been so happy.
Being a bit jaded.
It was a clever decision on your part, Babs. Because I know shit.
I was just relying on the you know, the three of you to have a bit more knowledge. And actually, there are some suggestions there that I will go and listen to when I listen back to this episode to see if there are any Muse songs post 2009. So no, this was a great way for me to get off my chest how much I love Muse. So, you know, despite disagreeing, thank you for inviting us on and for letting us rhapsodize about Matt Bellamy and co.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. It's lovely to listen back to an album from my early noughties love of indie rock, and I've also rediscovered the remix album, and I'll probably listen to that tonight because it's pretty awesome.
And no offence, Fran, but Babs, you in particular, shall, whether you like it or not, be back to do a Millionaire album with me because I need my backup because nobody else seems to know who the fuck I'm talking about.
So I had 2 copies of Outside the Simian Flock and sent Fran the second one. So he now has the CD thanks to me. But yeah, and actually they are touring Belgium at the moment, but unfortunately I don't think I'm here the days that they're coming, so I won't be able to see them again just yet. But I think Tim Van Hamelen is still going. He's still posting on social media.
Well, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for being so generous with your time. Mark, do we know who we're getting on next?
Yes, we do. Should we reveal it or?
Yeah, you might as well.
So Vicky is returning to the podcast, Vicky Henry, and all the way from Australia via massive time delay. Our pal Craig Carrick is coming on he's coming on remotely, so we're all going to get pissed basically. He's getting pissed at 7 o'clock in the morning, we're getting pissed at 11 o'clock at night, you know, that's just kind of how we roll. And we're going to do Caught Up by Millie Jackson, which I mean Millie fucking Jackson, man. Yeah, I mean I had never heard her before, started doing the research last week. Delightful.
If you want an introduction, look up the Fuck You Symphony.
This sounds fantastic. I'm Googling it immediately.
Before you go, what do you want to plug?
I will plug the podcast, Over Underrated, that Fran and I do.
Yeah, listen to our podcast if you've got some time, guys.
If you like people arguing over music, and I think if you listen to Unsung podcast, you do, come on over. It's on all the usual places, and we are recording season 3 at the moment, hopefully to launch in a few months.
Nice. We should have done seasons way back at the start. We fucked it, man.
we were just on a very long season 1.
Yeah, I think we do it for kind of our sanity because, you know, we only then release it when we have enough episodes to do it. Otherwise, I think it would be a bit all over the place. But you know, there's no meaning behind it. It's just how organised we are, basically. But
we just prefer all over the place. That's
yeah.
Nothing wrong with that, to be honest. Yeah.
Okie doke, everybody, look after yourselves, and we'll see our listeners back here next week, and maybe you'll see some of them on your channel soon.
Good night, everyone.
See you guys. Thank you for having me.
Thanks.